Okay. So yeah, very warm welcome and thank you to our panelists who we're delighted can join us today. And we've asked each of the panelists to join us because they have a great deal of experience and varied experience in teaching and integrating Excel into the curriculum in modules that they teach and across the curriculum. So I will ask them to introduce themselves in just a moment. And before we do that, I would also like to say thank you so much to all the attendees on the phone and those who are in the process of joining now. We know it's a very busy time of year, but we're really excited to present this roundtable today because we think that our panelists have got a lot to share and a lot of really useful tips. And I think also many challenges that will resonate with each of you. So this is, a fairly informal event. We've got a lot to say and I'm looking forward to that. And so please do pop your questions in the chat. If they need to be answered straight away, they will be. And if not, we'll be leaving some time for Q&A where you can directly ask the panelists more questions. So please do pop anything that you have in the Q&A or the chat and we'll help you from there. So just to kick off, I think we're going backwards. So I'm going to start with just saying hello, everyone. My name is Morwenna. I'm Director of Product Enablement here at McGraw Hill, and I'll be moderating today. And we have the lovely V on the phone as well, or on the line, who is our marketing manager, who is looking after this event. And also we have Rob Lowe, who's our sales and commercial director, who's on the chat and helping to deal with any questions that we have. So what I wanted to do was actually just start by introducing or asking the panelists to introduce themselves and give a little bit of background about what they're teaching at the moment. And then we'll kick off into all of our very interesting questions around the challenges they've been facing. So in order, we will start with you, Laurie.
Hi, yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. My name is Laurie O'Brien. I'm a teaching fellow at the University of Surrey down in Guildford. I teach on a weird range of modules, everything from numeracy, so kind of reminding people about maths if they've been a few years out doing maths. I teach an introduction to Excel course. I teach international business strategy and then also a module on globalization of emerging markets. So a little bit of everything.
Fantastic, thank you. And following in our order here, over to you, Ingrid.
Hi, everyone. Boy, that's pre-COVID hair, that picture. It's gotten a lot longer. Hi, I'm currently based in Doha, Qatar. I'm an instructor in business management, also teach a wider range. I came to teaching relatively recently. Prior to that, I was in industry. I teach everything from project management to intro to Excel, corporate finance, kind of a jack of all trades. And yeah, happy to be here as well and really looking forward to some of those questions and ideas.
Thank you so much. And Fergal.
Hi, everybody. My name is Fergal O'Brien. I'm a lecturer in finance at the University of Limerick in Ireland. I've been teaching for about 25 years. I teach a lot of finance, large group teaching for the most part, which creates its own challenges. And obviously the pivot or move to online has been interesting. Yeah, so use Excel in terms of my teaching finance, particularly to undergrads, but also play around a little bit with things like MATLAB and R to help me with more complex problems. So the thing about me is I actually don't use Excel that much anymore, barring my teaching. I use other applications in my research, but that should help. And I really hope to learn something here today as well as contribute. Thank you.
Oh, many thanks. Well, thank you all so much. And before we move into our questions, just wanted to let you know that this is the first of a series of events that we're kicking off in this sort of space. So some upcoming webinars that we'll be hosting include sort of employability skills and graduate outcomes. So how do we meet the needs of future employers? Microsoft Office 365 and beyond. What's next? What's coming with the next release, and how do we integrate that into the classroom? Career readiness with digital credentials. So thinking about how that fits into the education space and how we can use that to motivate our students. And also beyond Excel, so overcoming the challenges in teaching students the wider Microsoft Office skills, which some of us on the panel and also on the call today may be involved in teaching things like PowerPoint or Word. So just a couple of things that are upcoming there. So I'm going to stop my share there so we can see the panelists. So thank you all very much again. I'm going to start with a bit of a tricky question, and I'm going to go from, I'm probably going to follow the same order, to be honest. So Laurie, I'm going to start with you. Thinking about that move, that move into emergency remote teaching as we went straight into COVID, can you talk to us a little bit about what challenges that threw up, and any information you want to share with us about how you overcame those challenges?
Yeah. So a particular challenge that happened for us was that we were due to have our midterm Excel exam in the week 7, so that mid-March, and that week was going to be the first week we had to be online. The week before, the students had an option to come in or to join us remotely. And for this Excel module, we made the decision to actually move all of those students online in the week 6, so that we could actually check all of their computer access. Did they have Excel on particularly their computers? Did they have an up-to-date version of it? If they didn't, trying to get them to download it. That was a real problem if they had Apple computers, and if they had Macs, because often trying to get the software updated was tricky. And then trying to just make sure that they knew how to navigate through our test system. And so there was the preparing the students, making sure they knew how to use Zoom for the teaching, but also that they were able to have access to a computer to do their exams on. And then I think the other big challenge with the Excel was that we suddenly had to turn this to an open book exam, and therefore had to very quickly create multiple versions of our exam that we could to ensure the academic integrity. That was our challenges mid-March.
So just a small handful of challenges, and some interesting points that you've raised here, which I want to check on with next Ingrid as well, but things like how do we manage the different versions that students might be using? How do we cater to Mac and PC users?
Yeah, and I'm going to totally agree with that. One of the presumptions that you made was that students had a computer at home. That was one of the, that was a huge assumption that we had to make. And that first and foremost, that was one of the big hurdles we had to get past. We had to do a lot more, be open to asynchronous style testing, because maybe they were sharing one computer amongst multiple siblings at home. And so therefore, maybe not necessarily able to write the test at the time that we wanted. So as Laurie said, moving to more open book style testing, trying to then challenge ourselves with different styles of questions. You're kind of flipping the page and going, okay, how can we make it maybe more open and testing skill, as opposed to sometimes relying on multiple choice, which we can do in class. But yeah, the multiple versions of Excel, that was a big one. And we didn't deal very well with the Mac issue. I will be very frank. None of the teachers we had were Mac users. And so we kind of had to do okay, let's go find a YouTube video that shows you how to do whatever we're doing on a Mac and deal with it that way. That was kind of our fallback. But we were very fortunate, and probably be my one little pitch for Simnet today, but we were actually using Simnet at the time. So we were able to kind of make a transition to online, because we were already using an online platform for our students to access. So it did help, but there were still some challenges for sure.
Yeah, we're getting quite a growing list here. And for anyone who doesn't know what Simnet is, I'll come back to that towards the end of the session. That's an online resource that Ingrid has been making use of. And Fergal, can I ask you, listening to those kind of challenges, Excel might be sort of relied on in different ways in your courses, but were any of these things a problem for you, like versions, Mac computers, computer at home, or did you have different challenges going online?
No, a very similar story. I think even beyond having a PC at home, having the space or even a safe space in certain cases for people to access the software and be able to engage in a, you know, in a quiet space, even in houses, etc., was really problematic. But similar problems that the other speakers have raised. We were quite lucky, I think, in that we had some learning technologists on board, COVID hitting, and our university invested even more heavily as COVID emerged. So we were slightly ahead of the curve, and that helped a lot, because when we got these issues, we were able to direct them to the learning technologists and the real experts in this field. And to be fair to our ITD department within our university, they were very good in providing extra resources for people. And even for me, when I log a call now, there will be a specific section for Apple users, because obviously, as everybody has said, that creates huge problems. So we were kind of lucky. But in terms of my own teaching and students having access to the correct version, it wasn't a major issue. And very often when students contact me with problems, it was, have you tried turning your computer off and on? I mean, sometimes it's as basic as that.
Yep, very best
Clear your
advice.
cache.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, similar problems though across the board, I think.
And what was something that you did during online teaching? And I know we're all still in various stages of that. What was something that you did that you found quite successful in helping students?
So I think for me, I'll jump in again with
You're right.
to work. I think for me there was a couple of things. One, as I mentioned briefly in the other answer, I actually just took a little bit of time in some of the first actually kind of our tutorial sessions just to demonstrate to them or get them to familiarize themselves with we were using Zoom, but how they could find the chat, how that they could put their hand up or do a thumbs up, so show them how to engage with it, particularly if they didn't want to come off mute. And that was definitely a particular thing I found. Having two screens from my perspective was really helpful, because I could put the chat box over on and the participant list over on my other screen, and then I could kind of see out the corner of my eye if anyone was raising questions. So I think that taking that initial time to get them familiar with the particular package was helpful.
Fantastic. And what about yourself, Ingrid? What was something that you...
One of the big things that we did is we adopted, especially at the very beginning, we adopted we went from synchronous classes to a more asynchronous model, and giving the students the option. So rather than sort of demanding that they be on a Zoom session at a specific period of time, recording the classes, making them available at different times. And that really helped, especially at the beginning when, they were everybody was scrambling. And a lot of the students found, especially if they've all actually said that they like being able to go back and access that recording at a later date to see what the teacher was saying. It's almost something that, as we're back in the classroom here in Doha, and it's almost something that many of the students now, you can sort of see, they're like, oh nuts, I missed class and I'm done. Right? I have to go find someone who hopefully attended and actually paid attention. So that's something that we really found worked. And then also for particular skills that students were struggling with, we would use either Zoom or perhaps, like I love my tech, so I had the technology, and I would record short videos to show particular skill and load those into the LMS, learning management system. And that really seemed to kind of help students get past that first hurdle of how do I just get through this. So that was probably the biggest one that we did to get us through that first initial stage of COVID.
Dealing with it. And Fergal, I can see you nodding, and I know you've mentioned videos and stuff before. Was that, is that something that you're finding similar and that you're looking to take into as we move back into face-to-face?
Yeah, like my class is particularly suitable to video because it just discipline it's finance, and it's very factual, I suppose. 2 + 2 = 4, and it does. So there's no real need for a huge debate just in the fundamentals of finance course, for example. So asynchronous works really, really well for me, particularly large groups, etc. No pressure on the platform. Not talking to 300 or 400 people live who are not necessarily always engaged, which can be quite off-putting and affect the people that are engaged, because it does affect the teacher, in my opinion. Videos, massive improvement to my teaching. So I could do something in a lecture, illustrate a particular technique in Excel, and refer to, there is another short video in the VLE for you to look at this a little bit more closely. And the other thing, and I've always said this about teaching anything that's in any way technical, is make the mistakes for them in those videos. When you actually make the mistakes, and very often, by the way, I'm actually genuinely making the mistake and I need to correct myself. And on that basis, I think the learning experience is much better. And it's good for the students to know it's not necessarily straightforward. You might have to do it 10, 20, 50, 100 times and make those mistakes until it becomes second nature to you. So I think the biggest impact of COVID for me in terms of pivoting to online, etc., is actually shooting these short videos, maybe 2 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, rarely 10 minutes, by the way, 2 minutes or 5 minutes, to show a particular technique. It's bite-sized. The students like it. They can revisit whenever they want. And like I said, making the mistakes with them, I think is very illustrative.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in there as well, because that couple of the ones, we definitely did the videos as well. Again, those kind of 2 or 5 minute videos. We tended not to record the actual live sessions for this particular Excel module, because actually those videos are what they need to look back at. They need to remind themselves. But that making mistakes was a particular thing, I think, that we found worked really well. We were very much used to kind of doing an in-person class where we'd talk through something, demonstrate it on the big screen, and then set them up on their worksheets following the instructions and practicing, and go around and answer questions as they came up. And now suddenly, if they've only got one screen, it's quite hard for them to be trying it whilst they're following along what we're doing. So they're often switching between different screens. And so, yeah, just taking that, I would just demonstrate a lot more. And as Fergal said, just make the mistakes frequently by accident, and then talk them through how to get out of that mistake. There was also a lot of, even just showing them, like someone says, oh, how do we do this in Mac? And I'm like, okay, I don't know, only one of our colleagues had a Mac, so we did a lot of Googling too, but actually then taking them through that, showing them how I would go and Google for that, saying, okay, well, or I'm doing this and I've now forgotten how to do this, but I know these are the kind of things Excel can do, and then showing them how I might type in a question to search for a video. So just making them see that it is a living, breathing, learning thing for them, but also for us. So.
Fantastic. I'm all about making mistakes. I'm going to come back to you in a second, Laurie, but Ingrid.
Can I come in there, Marwena? There's just a question while we're on point there from Diego in the chat. And he asks about the risk of students writing in their module evaluation that the teacher makes mistakes in the videos. Very, very good question. I don't know if I sent the response by in the chat, but anyway, I think it's really important that I understand why teaching evaluations are important, depending on where you are in your career and depending on how your university values them and weights them, right? But I'm not convinced we should ever let teaching evaluations drive the way we teach. I'm not concerned about the teaching evaluation when I'm deliberately or otherwise making mistakes. To illustrate to students, I'm teaching at that point in time. And I really think that making those errors along with students, most of the time now deliberately, it's showing them that this is not linear in terms of you picking up this knowledge. You've got to make mistakes. I know when I was learning programming myself, I'm from a business background. I had no technical knowledge. I often walked the corridors in complete and utter frustration at the error terms that I was generating as part of my code. But ultimately, there's almost like a turning point where suddenly you get it, and you only get it through experience. So teaching evaluations, I think that they're potentially negatively impacting on how we teach. I understand that they're important, but I wouldn't let that necessarily drive your approach. Thankfully, I still seem to get decent enough ones. So the students don't seem to mind when I make a mistake. And I think they actually buy into it a little bit more.
Thank you.
So one of the other things that I'm actually, as we're speaking, I think one of the other things that I had to do as we got online was really force myself to slow down as I was teaching. And I had recorded back in my corporate life, I had recorded videos for work, and I'm looking at myself on screen. I hate when I do that. And I found that I was, and I remember recording one, and I said to my husband, I said, hey, come listen. And he listens, he goes, you need to slow down. And that really, then when we went online, and you really kind of had to look at the fact that students were looking like much smaller screens. They weren't looking at a big projector, that they were trying to follow your cursor as you're talking, and they can't. And so, yeah, really having to slow down, check myself, pause, ask questions, let them type their question in the chat. And there's nothing worse than going, so does anybody have any questions? And like even 30 seconds feels like a lifetime. No one's paying attention. And it's because they're two-finger typists and struggling. There's actually a question about attending through mobile devices. And I have to admit that was, yes, we had some students doing it. I have to admit for Excel, if I found, like if someone said I'm watching this through my phone, I'd say, okay, I have to admit you're probably going to want to come back and do this once you can access a computer screen. Unfortunately, this was one course that really did not adapt to mobile attendance. It's just you cannot visibly see what you're doing in Excel on screen.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I started using, that slowing down was really important. And I would also find that I was narrating exactly what I was doing. So I would say, right, so I'm going to go over to the top left of the screen, and hopefully you can now see my mouse in the top left box. I'm going to click in here, pause. Then I'm going to right-hand click, and it's going to bring this up. And if it's all right, if I just
Please do. Yep.
what am I doing? Just going to hide things over on different screens.
Laurie has a very good tip for us.
Yeah. So I'm just going to share my screen really briefly, and hopefully people can now see my screen. I've got an Excel document up, and you hopefully can now see I've got a little yellow cursor around my mouse. And this is a nice little thing. You can turn this on in Office, not in Office, in your computer. But this is actually one I downloaded. What I like about this one is if I left click, it changes color. And if I right click, it changes color. So it really just helped the students follow what I was saying, and then back that up with color transitions. And I can switch it on and off quite easily. So it was a little thing called Cursor Highlighter. You can always Google Cursor Highlighter 2.2, and it was designed by another academic just for helping his teaching.
Phenomenal. And Ingrid, you similarly had a challenge with showing people what you were doing on the formula bar. Would you mind telling us a little bit about how you overcame that challenge?
Sure. So what I did was because the formula bar is really small and on screen. So I actually Googled, how can I change my default font so that my formula bar shows up much larger? And yeah, if I can share my second screen here. So what I did is it's actually in 20 font, and you can make it as bigger, and it's actually very simple. It's under File, Options, in the General tab right here, just change your font. And it worked like that helped. right? Because the formula bar was so small and the kids couldn't see it at all. That was yes. So between the two, I also changed my cursor color, but I didn't do the highlighted ball thingy. I gotta do that still.
Yeah, I think we all learned a lot on that one. Fergal, did you come up with any innovations beyond the videos, or did you find that they were sort of sufficient to help you?
No, I'm like I said, I hope to learn something here today, and those 2 tips are definitely something I'm going to take away from here. They're excellent. No, this might seem strange to you, but I actually got my students to follow a Twitter account, which is Excel Humor. I'm not sure if you've come across it. Has anyone come across Excel Humor? Because it's just so hilarious in terms of how it points out aspects of Excel, both strong and weak.
Right.
So it's a really good way of engaging the students, and a lot of the time there are subtleties in the memes or whatever that are put up there, but if you get it, you get it, and the students start getting it as they go along. So for example, in a cell, there's this famous example of, in a cell there's 20 plus 50, and then somebody is presenting a spreadsheet with 20 plus 50, and in a cell it's not calculated or anything. So 20 plus 50 equals 70. They've typed it out, as opposed to allowing it to be updated with new information or whatever, or refreshed. So little things like that in the Twitter account. And the students are much more engaged on those platforms than they are probably ever going to be on a VLE. So they actually pick up little tricks through that Twitter account, etc. So if you look that one up, it's actually funny, some of the stuff there.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to go in reverse now. I'm going to go back to you again, Fergal. With each of you teaches slightly different modules. What can you tell us about the students' confidence levels coming into your classroom about their Excel skills? And are they overconfident, are they underconfident, and what happens if they do struggle to understand something? Because I'm really interested in the fact that you're teaching them sort of life skills there, which is that you can't just do something in Excel one time and necessarily have it right. It's okay to continue practicing.
Yeah, I suppose I have to talk about in the context of the Irish system. So the Irish secondary school system is very much about regurgitation of information.
Mm-hmm.
Study, regurgitate it, forget about it, or whatever the case might be. There wouldn't be a lot of Excel taught within the secondary school system, not much at all. And in fact, transition year students, which would be about 2-3 years through their secondary experience, so midway through their secondary school or high school experience, no Excel skills whatsoever. And then they go into this high pressure exam type environment in senior cycle, their last couple of years, where Excel is not really assessed at all. So they come into first year at university with no Excel skills. They might get a general Excel type course, statistics course, maybe a maths course, depending on what university you're operating in. So they come into me in second year to do finance, and I assume that they have no Excel skills. They certainly would not be overconfident. If anything, they would be, I'd say, overwhelmed, which is a strong word, by the way, in Excel, because it is quite friendly in the sense that it's black box. There's good help function, well, relatively good help function. So I would say that they're overwhelmed. So to help that, when we encounter a use for Excel in finance, what I tend to do is build it around a problem and go through that problem step by step. So we might take a particular scenario, pluck the information out of the scenario, set it up nicely in Excel, and then start operating on it using the functionality within Excel. That helps me to slow down a bit. And it also helps them to understand that you just can't go in there and expect everything to work. And that over time, you will get experience in terms of how to lay out problems within Excel and how to allow cells to change in value and everything to update immediately, and how to use the dollar sign to fix cells. So there's a huge incremental type learning in Excel. So that's how I would treat my students that come into second year of a general business degree, very little Excel, low confidence, and then you're down to these kind of like perceived ease of use and perceived usefulness from their perspective. And that takes a bit of investment on their part.
Excellent. And Laurie, is that how does that sort of equate to your experience and the types of students that you see coming teaching in?
Yeah. So again, I'm picking up on some of the questions. So I teach a first year, second semester module on Introduction to Excel that's part of another module on business decision making. And then in the first semester, I teach the same group of first years a numeracy module because we recognize that a lot of our students come in without A-level maths. They won't necessarily have done any mathematics for the last 2 or 3 years. So before they get into their finance modules in the second semester and then in the second year, we want to just bring them back up a little bit. And then again, we don't assume that anyone has any Excel knowledge. We always check what Excel knowledge we have, and there's normally at least 1 or 2 people in each class or each group who's used Excel somewhat. I actually make use of them. So everything I teach, I always say, I don't know everything. No one can ever know everything. With Excel, even between myself and my colleagues, there will be particular tips and tricks we use, things I learned from them, things they learned from me. A lot of what I knew in Excel was what I needed to learn and do for my job. And what I'm trying to get them to understand from this course is A, to do some of these basics. We teach it very much as well to work with the types of Excel tests they get for job interviews, but also just to get them having that confidence that they can think beyond. And someone asked about slowing down. I actually just found that repetition, I'd go, right, we've tried this, now let's look at this in a different scenario. Okay, we also want to do a sum if here, let's go back through the sum if again, and just giving that kind of repetition. And all sorts of things I had I talk about my husband teaches and things. So my husband, someone wrote in the thing about the formulate text. My husband told me that if you do, I think I can't remember whether it's Control or Windows, and what's called the tilde key, which is to the left of the 1, that will change from it showing you the result of a formula to showing you the formula that's in the box. And so I told my colleagues that, and then I will share that it's always learning. I teach my husband some stuff on Excel. My colleagues teach me. I teach them, and that's fine. We learn it because we use it, and we get quicker at it as we use it. And I always tell them the story that one of my colleagues writes the exam, and we do a test on the time. And normally, if I can do it in half an hour, it's about the right length for the students to do it in an hour. But I also tell them that the first time I do it, if I've, start the second semester when I haven't looked at this stuff for 6 months, I've got to remind myself, hang on, what's the VLOOKUP again? I know it, but going to find the things it needs for the test and the style of the questions, practice makes me much quicker at it. And it can affect how quickly I can do that Excel exam by about 5 to 10 minutes. So being authentic, I guess, is my view on the teaching.
Really strong tip, and something that I think we needed to kind of come back to, especially as we went online, which is being honest and telling people what you know and what you don't know, and allowing yourself that time to make mistakes or to work through things. Yeah. Ingrid, you've had quite different experiences, and now we're talking about a different school system again. Could you tell us a little bit about the students who are coming into your classes?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest challenges I had was having to learn to not make any assumptions about the math skills that students had when they came in. It seemed to be a combination of whether or not they had math skills, and then what their computer literacy skill level was. And Excel kind of combines those two and makes it creates just another level of challenge, it almost seems. And so you really find that you have to let the students who know what they're doing almost be able to, and that's where I actually found online and going asynchronous kind of helpful, because those students that were really mastering this and kind of knew what they were doing, maybe they took Excel in high school and simply had to take this module because it's required. they were just able to push ahead and move on through, and they would learn the new things. And the other students, we really, you find that you just are really taking a lot of time. And the other thing that I've found teaching Excel is there's a lot of terminology that's used in Excel that is really unique to it as a program. Row, column, cell, array, table, field. These are all, if you've got a little bit of coding background, even if it's just a smidge, it doesn't feel so foreign. But I'm in a second language environment on top of all of this. And boy, some days it's, you really kind of have to take the time to make sure that they're following along, come up with different ideas. Yesterday, I was actually teaching tables, and I said, okay, now these become a field. Think of it, like a row of carrots and a row of to try and get them to visualize what they're seeing, and that it's its own thing now in Excel. That's one, it's second language together with perhaps, and some students have very poor math skills, some are quite good, and really trying to figure out how you balance that. I actually found asynchronous teaching was actually easier for that, because the students that struggled, we could get into screen share and talking, and the ones that were happy to just go off and do the assignment on their own, off they went. It was better.
And that's such a key issue, because regardless of where we are, I think we have a large number of international students, some of whom are second language, and that's so now we're talking about digital literacy as well as language skills, and then not just language skills, but as you say, technical language skills, or specific English skills. Very specific to Excel. And then when you're trying to explain functions, and some of those functions, you just really had to figure out multiple different ways to try to get them to understand those basics. And Fergal made a reference to fixing references, absolute and relative referencing. It is such a fundamental piece of Excel, and if you somehow gloss over that and the students don't get it, the rest of the course just becomes a challenge. So it's really kind of taking the time to make sure that those key fundamental bits that you are going to repeat over and over, you continuously repeat them over and over, and give students an opportunity to catch on. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm learning a lot here, and I think we're making lots of notes about, sort of what's required based on your experience. I just saw this really great comment in the chat from Diego about one of the tools that they're using called Openboard, and I'm going to just try to give Diego the ability to just jump on, because I thought that was a great thing that might be worth sharing. Thank you so much, Diego.
Thanks, Morwenna. Hi, all. Thank you very much. I was not expecting to jump in the panel, so thank you very much for this. No, I just thought that it will be useful if I share this, because it has proven quite useful for me with my students during lockdown. And you may be aware of Openboard, which is basically a tool for writing and etc. And if you have a pen and a small tablet, it makes it easier, but you can still use the mouse. The thing is that one of the attributes of Openboard is to have it can be used as a layer on top of whatever you are doing in your screen. So when I'm teaching Excel, I key in the formulas, I explain the functions and etc. But sometimes when I need to go back to them and explain the students more slowly what I have just done, usually when we are keying in the formula, it goes faster than the students can appreciate. And it is useful to be able to write circles, arrows, or to write bubbles around what we have just done, indicating the students which is the window that we have just opened, which is the add-on that we need to open, and etc. And to do this with the skin of Openboard on top allows me to write several even comments, handwritten comments on top of the Excel sheet. And I can immediately save it as a PDF file and pass it to the students, exactly what they are seeing in the screen, rather than having the students taking screenshots or myself taking screenshots of what I have just done. And it goes immediately, directly as a PDF. Thing is that Openboard is an open source application, so it's available for everyone. And I think that you are a bit old-fashioned, you like writing in the board. Well, having this combination of being able to actually scrabble things on top of your spreadsheet, I think that is a very good tool for teaching Excel.
Fantastic, thank
Yeah,
you.
I actually did, to take Diego's point, we have Epson projectors in our classrooms here, which have a pen that you can write on screen. And I also use the Zoom annotation feature at times. But yeah, I would actually be all by myself in a classroom, projecting the class on the screen so I could be writing with the pen and talking while I'm sure people would walk by this classroom. I'm yelling and talking, my hands are going everywhere, and I'm all by myself. But it was incredibly effective, especially when I was teaching, because corporate finance, and trying to show them how, you know, the budgeting would work, and using Excel and kind of highlighting one and circling and showing how the formula would travel from one place to another. It is very, very effective if you can annotate some of those pieces, for sure. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you, Ingrid. Now, Fergal, question for you. When you're teaching the Excel skills, does that typically appear in any of your exams or anything like that? Or is it more that they just need to sort of use Excel to calculate the answers?
Traditionally, it never appeared in my exams because I had high stakes exams at the end of a semester where everybody went into a big room, like 600 students in a sports hall, doing their manual calculations with their calculator or their tables or whatever the case might be. But now I recently had a midterm, which is obviously online, open book. Anybody that was really plugged in would have had their Excel spreadsheets ready to calculate their present values or to calculate their internal rates of return, etc. Now, that creates the next problem, which is how do you actually differentiate between your A student, your B student, your C student, etc. So I put a significant time constraint on it, what I considered to be enough. Many students did well. Many got 15 out of 15, many got 14 out of 15, but many struggled. They couldn't manage their time. They obviously hadn't their Excel sheets set up. They reverted back to calculating things by hand, which, by the way, they still had enough time to do it that way if they were really, really clued in. It is now a feature of my exams in an online environment, but it does create its own problems. You can still have multiple versions of the test, etc. But if you allow people too much time in that environment, they're all going to get eventually, either on their own or through sharing of knowledge across a large window of time, they're all going to get close to 100%. So it's a challenge now in my view, and I'd be interested to hear from the other panelists in terms of how they cope with that. So you can obviously set more complex problems or problems that require a little bit more analysis and insight, but depending on the level of the student. So if you're testing the fundamentals of finance, Ingrid, right, you're going to be testing like PV, IRR, that type of thing, which are basic functions, let's be honest, in Excel, maybe somewhat challenging people for the first time, but the time issue becomes a problem. Anyway, that's a long answer to your question, Marwina. Basically, never before because of the way we used to administer exams, but now, certainly in midterms, etc., we're going back to face-to-face exams, by the way. If nothing else, we need them for exemption purposes from accounting bodies, etc., and they need to be bulletproof. So, but certainly this year we've had the online Excel exams, but that's a challenge, and I don't know how the other contributors feel about it.
Excellent. I know they've both got lots to say. So Ingrid, you're off mute first.
Okay. So we did two things. With corporate finance, we actually had enough labs that we would have students write in person with a computer, and students had the option. They could use a calculator or they could use Excel. From a time perspective, what you found was that the students that had, because we were allowing both, the students that used Excel and had mastered it, you know, it was like, oh, look at you leading really quickly, because they were just like, boom, done. The ones that were on the calculator, they tended to do as well, but it took them a little bit longer. We didn't challenge the insightfulness. That's kind of, it's a bit of a challenge we have just with second language and so on. But anyway, yeah, I actually find that when we allow Excel in the exams, if we can have enough labs, and we're actually in the challenge now, we've grown really quickly, we don't have enough labs, so we're going back to paper-based exams, and a number of our students are really like, what? You know, I got to use a calculator now. Like what? Because they become accustomed to Excel. And for me personally, I'm sitting here going, you know, this is, you know, I think one of the things that we often are doing a lot of this for is getting kids employable. And for me, I would really rather that they learn how to master doing these kinds of problems with the tools that they're going to face in the workforce. And it's not going to be some weird financial calculator. It's actually going to be tools like Excel. And I've found that when I can really get students thinking about that and doing problems, you know, even in class, and sort of saying, okay, here's a list of raw data. This is, I can tell you right now, this is exactly what I would have got when I was sitting at work. What are the kinds of questions your boss would be asking you about this? You know, and they actually came up with a whole bunch of, and it was interesting because I had 3 different classes, 3 different lists of things that their boss would ask for. And it was a bit more challenging as an instructor because, of course, you had to be like spontaneously coming up with how you would get to whatever they'd come up with. But if you're not, but it's still, it was actually way more effective because the students felt way more successful when they had mastered the kind of problem that they had envisioned. I found that it was actually a really, really successful class.
But I think the fact,
I hope you.
Sorry, Ingrid, I think the fact that your students,
Yeah, go ahead.
Think, oh no, we have to go back to a calculator is actually a measure of the success that you had in teaching Excel, because that is awesome. That is awesome that they're actually complaining that they have to go back to a calculator. Actually, our university doesn't even allow scientific calculators. Not allowed.
Yeah,
We're
allowed this. We have this BA2. It's a BA2 plus. It's a financial calculator. It's the only one that's allowed, but not the fancy graphing one. Super hidden sheet. Ooh. You have to know how to put it in. Yeah. So what I did now, one of the challenges was though, is that you had to actually create a unique file per student. But the super hidden sheet, no, even if they unhide the sheet, unhide sheets, it doesn't come out unless you actually know how to access F12 and the macros. And yeah, so we caught some students that way when not too many. It was actually, to be honest, I was actually really impressed by how few students cheated, given how easy it would have been to do it. Well, right? Like, I mean, to just email files around it, you know, you think that they're all going to do it, and it was actually really heartening, I guess, to think that they actually didn't. It was, yeah. Anyway, it's called I think it's super hidden sheet or very hidden sheet, something along those lines. It was for more of a project. So it was a multi-stage project that students had to do, and kind of emphasize, going back to what Lori was just saying, trying to get students past the mechanics of just learning where to click. Like, this is how I bold, this is how I set a table up, and getting them to then really use Excel for what it's for, which is to interpret information and make data more useful in the business world. You know, really trying to get students to that stage is really where I'd like to get to. That's where, you know, and getting them to really understand why they want to be able to do that. And like I said, the lesson the other day where they were solving this problem and coming up with ideas. And I said, if you know how to do this when you're sitting in the office, you know, and you can, and really quickly your boss says, I need to know blah. And you go, okay, well, I download this, I do this. And you send it back and you do it in a matter of a few minutes. I said, to this day, you will be a rock star, because it's amazing how few people can actually do that in the workforce. It's so yeah.
Yeah, unsung heroes, I think, the Excel guru. Okay, so we're 6 minutes. I'm a mega timekeeper today. So I've got a couple of questions that we haven't answered in the chat. And then we'll finish off, we'll try and finish off on the hour. But a great question, so to any of you, who at your institution normally kind of addresses the digital and sort of literacy, numeracy skills? Is that being sort of left for you guys to do at the module level or at the degree level, or?
Yeah, I think whilst there is support for it, probably from the learning development function in the library, it really was a number of years ago when we realized that we were having a lot of students really struggling with a second semester introduction management accounting module. And kind of looking back at that and trying to investigate what was going on, that's when we really realized that we had so many students coming in without A-level maths. And so we made the choice to add this part into one of the first semester modules. And I think it was the same kind of thing came within the Excel. The Excel came beforehand, but the Excel was really kind of feedback from what did companies want. And we have really some really good placement schemes, and we have a lot of students go out on placement. So getting that feedback from those employees, and that brought us to bring in the Excel module. Because it's really something that I think isn't taught. And I'm not sure it was taught when I was at school, but I think it was, using computers was still new, kind of coming in and starting. And so they assumed that no one knew anything. So we were all learning together, and I think that helped. But I definitely see that a lot of students really don't come in with any of it. And anytime I speak to students who've been on placement, the first thing they say is, oh, that first year Excel module, most useful thing I ever did.
I totally agree with that. We have a large placement scheme as part of our undergraduate degrees, and invariably when we go on our visits, both the students and the employers say, you need to teach more Excel, and the students say, we need to learn more Excel. So I would agree entirely with that. I do think, however, that the movement to online, certainly for me, has focused my mind in terms of using Excel more. The problem we have, I suppose, at universities, particularly my one and others in all around the world, is we're faced with increasing class sizes. I don't know if that's the experience of most people on this call. I teach general business degrees. We've got class sizes up to 650, touching 700 now. Very difficult to resource, rightly or wrongly, the teaching of Excel in a traditional classroom setting. But we've now been kind of forced or empowered almost to deliver it a different way. And I think it's a huge benefit in my course that we can record videos. And this was available prior to COVID, don't get me wrong, but we've been forced into this environment now. Traditional dinosaur teachers like me, right? So I gotta go shoot my videos now. I can do bite-sized stuff that will allow students to engage with Excel in their own time, at their own convenience, repeatedly. If they forget stuff, they can go back, revisit it, etc. So I think this, I suppose, disruption of COVID has really helped in this space.
Yeah, like you, we have really large courses, and I think when we went online, we had 330 first-year students to get through the Excel module, and we got 300 of them through first time. And there are 3 of us who teach on it in tutorial groups of 20 to 30 people. So we do an awful lot of this each year, and it does take a lot of our teaching. And it's always basically given to those of us who happen to be able to do Excel. We kind of get found, and then alongside our other teaching, it going, can you come and teach on this? It's how I ended up teaching the numeracy stuff. My first degree is engineering, and then I became a psychologist. So yeah, I also have experience teaching things like SPSS to psychologists, and a lot of similar issues there as well.
Fantastic. And Ingrid, we've got 1 minute left for you.
Yeah, numeracy. It's definitely an issue. And we keep trying to figure out ways to build up those math skills throughout the lower level courses, and it's just a challenge. There is some basic math courses that are being taught at the general level to try and get students up there, but regardless, every instructor comments on the fact that Excel, math, especially in the accounting and those finance-based courses, that we need to figure out how to continuously develop those skills throughout the course offerings and not silo them, which has been a tradition, has kind of been a thing. And to Fergal's point, yeah, figuring out new ways to deliver. I came from the corporate world. I'd been working at home for 10 years. I'd been on Zoom and doing it. So I just kind of went whoosh. I was online, but it definitely showed and highlighted how we could drive different, not necessarily better, just different ways to deliver our content. And I think that there's some that we should keep for sure.
Magnificent. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to, as promised, spend about 30 seconds now. Both Laurie and Ingrid mentioned Simnet, which was not the focus of today, but is something that they have been making use of or exploring, and that is an online simulated Microsoft environment that we offer. And I guess what's really stand out there is that almost all of it is auto-graded. It has inbuilt kind of cheating detection and some other things that we've heard today that can be a problem, such as it can automatically pick up Mac versus PC. And what's nice about it, I think, is that you get lifelong access. So for the life of that, you know, say Microsoft 365, you will always be able to use that into your career. So thank you for mentioning those. We've obviously skipped right through the Q&A because we've done that. But I just wanted to, and I hope that we've managed to get to all the questions, but I really just wanted to say thank you so much to our amazing panelists. Thank you, Fergal, Laurie and Ingrid, for sharing some fantastic ideas, and also some of our attendees as well. I thought that was a really invigorating discussion, and a lot can be learned from, you know, those challenges. But I think, you know, taking those forward and then changing what we do in face-to-face, or, you know, finding the best out of that. So I really thank you for your time, each of you, and I hope to see you all at our future events. So I will, we will have a recording of this as well, so I'll pop that up there. There are upcoming events. So again, thank you so much for your time, everybody on the call, and to our panelists.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.
Bye.
I know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks very much. Okay.
Cool. Do you want to stop the recording?
Oh, that's a good idea.